Welcome back to the second objective for day 31, chapter 27. In this objective, we're going to spend some time talking about nutritional and metabolic adaptations that bacteria have evolved to survive in their very diverse environments. So let's talk about prokaryotic nutrition. We want to think about how prokaryotes obtain energy and how they obtain carbon. So let's first think about obtaining energy. We can think of two different ways. One is if the bacteria are phototrophs, or if they are chemotrophs. Phototrophs obtain energy from light. Chemotrophs obtain energy from chemicals. So both these terms really match their definitions. Chemo for chemicals, photo for light. So next, let's think about how bacteria obtain carbon. So let's write obtaining carbon here. And this area of nutrition we can break down into two different categories: autotrophs and heterotrophs. Autotrophs require CO2 as a carbon source. They can then take this CO2 and build, using this single carbon and CO2, and build much larger carbon structures. Heterotrophs, however, they require an organic matter as a carbon source. So they are unable to construct larger carbon structures using CO2. They require a different source of it, whereas autotrophs can automatically make these large carbon structures. Now let's combine the source of carbon and the source of energy that the bacteria need in a broad category called modes of nutrition. Because remember, an organism needs both a source of energy and they also need a source of carbon in order to survive. So they have two ways to get carbon. Remember, we said CO2, these would be our autotrophs, and organic carbon source. And remember, these are our heterotrophs. We also said that the source of energy they could obtain would be from light, our phototrophs, or from chemicals, our chemotrophs. Maybe let's lump these together so we don't forget. This is our carbon source. And up here, these are our energy sources. So an organism that gets its carbon source from CO2 and uses light as an energy source, we would say that organism is a photoautotroph. An organism that gets its carbon from CO2 but its energy source from chemicals, we would call that a chemoautotroph. An organism that gets its carbon from an organic material and its energy source from light, we would call that organism a photoheterotroph. An organism that gets its carbon from organic material and its energy from chemicals, we would call that organism a chemoheterotroph. If you understand this table here and understand the sources of carbon that bacteria use and the sources of energy that bacteria use and how it combines it into a single organism, and know what these four terms means, you're in pretty good shape for this section of the material. The last thing we want to talk about in this podcast is the role of oxygen in metabolism. The last thing we want to talk about is the role of oxygen in metabolism. Remember, organisms like humans, we require oxygen in our metabolism. However, bacteria use oxygen in different ways, depending on the species of bacteria. So we have three terms that we use here to describe how bacteria use oxygen. The first is Obligate Aerobes. The second is Obligate Anaerobes. And the last one are facultative anaerobes. In thinking about these three terms, we need to think about the role oxygen has in their metabolisms. So some species are obligate aerobes, some are obligate anaerobes, and some are facultative anaerobes. In order to survive, an obligate aerobe requires oxygen for their metabolism. On the other hand, a bacterial species that is an obligate anaerobe is poisoned by oxygen. And so obligate anaerobes either survive by fermentation, a metabolic pathway that doesn't require oxygen, or they can use something called anaerobic. I'm going to sneak down here a little bit. Respiration. Typically, when we think about respiration, we think about the form of respiration that requires oxygen. However, some organisms undergo respiration in an environment without oxygen. And that's all you need to know about that for now. Facultative anaerobes sort of get the best of both worlds. If oxygen is around, it will use oxygen. However, if no oxygen, so if no oxygen, then the species of bacteria that are facultative anaerobes, they can undergo fermentation, so they can ferment, or undergo anaerobic respiration. I'm just going to write RESP because I'm out of room. All right, that's all we have for Objective 2. If you have any questions, please let us know. Bye.